Thank you. That was a fantastic talk to actually follow because in this presentation, you will ask the question, what is it that make us humans? What is it that make us thrive? And before I continue, I know that it's dark, but I wanted to see a show of hands of who here has used open evidence. Oh my God. So I'm going to have a prediction that in 2 or 3 years' time, there will be an entire morning or afternoon in the Big Sick that is dedicated to machine learning and artificial intelligence. So the title of this talk is Escaping the Rut, the AI Rut, Reimagining Learning, Purpose, and Power in Medicine. Before I continue, I wanted to disclose that I don't have any conflict of interest that is relevant to this presentation, but we do receive research funding from some organizations. So I'm going to start off by prefacing this talk with this statement. We cannot escape the AI rut by doing more of the same. Not with better algorithms, not with more data, not with incremental improvements to broken systems. I love storytelling, so I usually inject a lot of stories just to make it more fun. And I'm going to tell you 3 stories before I dive into the topic of AI. But before that, I wanted to say that what's happening right now as developers are creating models and algorithms and agents, most of them are just rearranging the furniture of a sinking Titanic. They're creating Band-Aids, Band-Aids that are shiny, Band-Aids that are smart, Band-Aids that are dangling in front of our eyes. They're creating skin staples, when in fact, the healthcare enterprise needs major organ transplantation. And no amount of Band-Aids is going to fix it. So the first story tells of this philanthropic group from a rich country that I will not name, and they wanted to do something good. They traveled to this far-flung village in Africa, and they said, let's see what problem we could solve. And some of you might have heard this story. They observed women walking, trekking 1.5 hours to the next village with large containers to fetch water and bring it back to the village. So they said, we're going to help you. We're going to save you 3 hours of your time by building a well right in the middle of this village. And they did that. They were so proud of themselves. They went back to the country. A year later, they said, we're going to go back to the village and see all the industry that has sprouted up as a result of the time saved that we gifted to the women who live in that village. And what do they observe? They go there and they still see the women trekking 1.5 hours to the next village with these large containers. And they said, they're so confused. What are you doing? We built this well inside your village so you don't have to go 1.5 hours away. And the women replied, you know, those 3 hours are the only time we could escape from our husbands. Those are the best time of our day. How dare you take that away from us? We can talk about what is the relevance of the story later. The second story is about the Choluteca Bridge. This bridge was built in Honduras between 1996 and 1998. They contracted a Japanese company, and it was amazing. But the year that it was supposed to open, Hurricane Mitch hit Honduras. Most of the bridges in Honduras were washed away, but not the Choluteca Bridge. But as you could see, both roads at each end of the bridge were completely washed away, and even the river moved because of the flooding. And this became known as the Bridge to Nowhere. This is what's happening to AI. We're taking our time to come up with frameworks. We're taking our time to build a curriculum to teach to our residents and fellows and medical students. In the meantime, this field is moving so fast. And it's not just moving so fast, it keeps shifting its shape, form, and function. We do not know what it's going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now. And the third story I'm going to tell comes from a paper that was written by Stevenson in 1967, where he experimented with rhesus monkeys. He put the monkeys in a room with a ladder right in the middle of the room, and he put bananas on top of the ladder. And of course, the first thing that the monkeys would do is climb up the ladder. But everyone a monkey tries to climb up the ladder, the other 4 monkeys get hosed down with water. And very soon they learn that if someone gets tempted to go near the ladder, they beat up. The other four monkeys would beat up the monkey. And so they learn not to go near the ladder. And then they replace one monkey. And of course, the new monkey, the first thing it tries to do is go up the ladder. But before it can do that, it gets beaten up. And it has no clue why the other four monkeys are beating it up. But it learned the lesson, I'm not going to go near that ladder. And then Stevenson replaced a second monkey. And the second new monkey, the first thing it tries to do is to climb up the ladder. But before it can do that, the other four monkeys, including the last new monkey, start beating up that new monkey, even though the last new monkey has no clue why are they beating up this monkey. And they continue replacing the monkey, and the tradition continued. So we have 5 monkeys. They never know why they're beating up a monkey that climbs up the ladder, but they continue doing it because we've inherited all these tasks from our ancestors in medicine. Okay. We wrote a piece in Nature Medicine in October, and the title is Teaching Machines to Doubt, because I think this technology is going to fail because of the human nature that has been bestowed to the machines that we created, and that is hubris, that is arrogance. When I go to machine learning conferences, all you hear is, my data is bigger than yours, my model is deeper than yours, I trained on 1 trillion parameters or data points. And this type of mindset is not going to save us from the AI rut. Last year, I was asked to give a talk, and the title that was given to me is AI worth it? And I said, that's not a very good title of a talk, because what if the answer is no? The ship is not going to turn around. It has sailed so far off the shore that the right question should be, how do we make AI worth its cost? Before we could answer this question, we asked ourselves, what is the cost of AI? And the first is opportunity cost. The valuation now for investments in AI is around $1 trillion. So open evidence just raised, it's now valued at $12 billion, which is double its valuation in September of last year. And this is opportunity cost. At the beginning, it's a zero-sum game. This money has to come from somewhere. And it's going to come from more important needs, for example, to improve population health. It's going to come from material needs, building new hospitals, building new clinics, training the workforce. It's going to be moved away from focusing on the nutrition of the population, focusing on health literacy. So just think about that. All this excitement is siphoning excitement away from what needs to be done. The second cost, and I'm hoping that this room is familiar with the environmental cost of AI. And I'm just going to rattle off some of the figures that I got from Claude, that training one large language model produces the carbon footprint of 125 round trips between Beijing and New York City. One ChatGPT query uses as much electricity as could light one light bulb for 20 minutes. And when you prompt a stable diffusion model to generate an image, it uses as much energy as fully charging your smartphone. Next is the extractivist nature of AI. The materials that we use to build data centers are primarily extracted from the global south. The workforce that we use to perform fine-tuning and reinforcement learning from human feedback, we exploit workforce from the global south. We pay Kenyans, for example, or OpenAI pays Kenyans between $1.30 to $2 per hour for this reinforcement learning from human feedback. And then we sell the AI back to the global south for millions of dollars, even though the materials that we use to develop the data centers, to build the data centers, and the workforce that we exploited came from them. Isn't this the reincarnation of colonialism? We've seen the first wave of workforce displacement, and this is just the beginning. If you have not asked yourself what part of your job cannot be replaced by AI, I think you're in a cave. And I asked this to the medical students, do you think that the medicine that you're going to enter is the same medicine that you thought you're going into? And of course, all of us went for a shock, right? The medicine that we thought we're going to deliver is not the ethically constrained environments that we are exposed to on the day-to-day, causing moral injury, which is actually the cause of burnout. And then another surprising thing is that women are 20% more likely to lose their jobs compared to men. What we're seeing now is that the white-collar entry-level jobs are all being replaced by AI. If you're a new graduate, good luck with finding a job. And if you decimate the white-collar entry-level knowledge jobs, you're going to hollow out the middle class because the blue-collar jobs are dependent on the white-collar jobs. So this is going to be a realization of what Thomas Piketty has said in his book, Capital, right? That if you have a technology and innovation where the return on capital is predominantly being given to a small segment of the population, then you're going to have more wealth inequality. And I think we are convinced that this is going to accelerate in an unprecedented manner. And finally, what would happen to human agency and human faculty? And we published this paper where we coined the term vibe science, because now you have agents that could perform the entire scientific inquiry process, from identifying the question to cleaning up your data, to giving you a table 1, to drawing you all the figures, to writing your paper, and then peer reviewing your paper. So what will be our role if that's the case? This is something new. This was it made a big splash this week. And this is the Malt bot, which originally was Claude bot. It's a social media for agents so that the agents can talk to each other, they can ridicule each other. But of course, there's a lot of humans that are posting here. But it makes you ask, what is our role in this universe? And it reminds me of this meme where the children ask Buddha, what makes us human? It's selecting all images with traffic lights. And if we're not careful, we're going to be pretty much down to this human here. But I also don't think that AI, I'm hoping, will not make our brains atrophy. What AI is doing very well now is replacing our Wernicke and our Broca's areas. So these are the areas that are responsible for comprehension and also for speech. But there are so much part of the cortex that is contributing to intelligence. And I think we have an immense opportunity to tap on that. So I've been influenced by a lot of philosophers. One of them is Bruno Latour. And if he were alive today, he would say, focus on specific practices, translations, and transactions that AI enables and facilitates rather than making grand pronouncements that AI will make our brains atrophy. We need to understand how different actors, programmers, patients, clinicians, data, algorithms, regulatory bodies negotiate and stabilize new forms of agency and authority. So going back to my question, how do we make AI worth its cost? It turned out that the answer is not rocket science, but it's an answer that we cringe upon, because the only answer here is to fix the world. If you don't fix the world, I think, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, we will be burning down the world as we know it. We ask ourselves, what's wrong with the world? I'm not going to go through this list, but I'm going to probably highlight the third one, where no matter how rich our discussion here, there's another discussion in another part of Switzerland, in another part of the world, where the venture capitalists and the private equity investors are plotting their next step on how to extract more value from us. And we need to take hold of this revolution. We need to wrestle the steering wheel away from them, because our lives are at stake. The lives of the next generations are at stake. People think that AI will fail because it will be wrong. No, the most dangerous risk from AI is the one that is hardest to detect. And that is the illusion of understanding, the illusion that it is an oracle, that it knows everything because it has access to all the information that is found in the internet. This is a very, very interesting paper that was published by Microsoft. And what they did here was to test different vision language models. They gave it multiple choice questions, and the questions consisted of different data types, including a text, sometimes with an image, sometimes with an echocardiogram, sometimes with a strip of a waveform. They wanted to know how the AI is able to answer the question correctly. And then they started masking different parts of the question. So if you look at the lower left hand, it has a question that's pertaining to an image with a nail. And when they masked the nail, the picture of the nail, AI was still able to answer the question correctly. And when they asked AI, well, how do you know that? AI said, well, the picture shows that, except that there was no picture. So what it tells us is that it's not learning it from just the associations of the tokens. It's actually learning it from the architecture with which we trained the model. And we have to be very careful. I always cringe when I see a model that has an accuracy of 90+%. And why is that? Because we know that the machines learn a lot of shortcut features. We're humans. Throughout our history, we learned shortcuts. And that allowed us to thrive, that allowed us to survive. And if we're not careful, it's also going to be the cause of the downfall of AI. So this is one of our papers that was published in the midst of the pandemic, where we demonstrated that AI can tell if a medical image was taken from a patient who is Black or who is white, without any clinical data. And we ran dozens and dozens of experiments, and we couldn't figure out what AI is learning. It wasn't the disease distribution, it wasn't the age distribution, because you could infer the age from the bones. Up to this point, we still haven't figured out how AI is able to learn whether the image belongs to a Black man or a white man in this data set from Stanford and from our hospital. And then the figures on the lower right hand came from a colleague and her team at MIT, Marja Gassimi. And they showed nicely that even the way we write on our notes on the electronic health records would give away the race ethnicity, even though they mask all the words Black, African American, white, Caucasian. So there was a difference in the way we use adjectives, even verbs, to describe our patient and the patient encounter. And then from our colleagues in ophthalmology, they learned that AI can tell whether the fundus photo belongs to a man or a woman. And they were shocked because not a single ophthalmologist would say that he or she could tell if the venules and arterioles belong to a man or a woman. But AI found out by being given millions of images of fundus photos that belong with labels of the sex of the patient. This one is hopefully will be published soon. It comes from our group. And we ask ourselves, can AI tell you if a patient is rich or poor if you give it a normal chest X-ray? So no radiologic abnormalities, no edema, no pneumonia. And the answer is up to 65%. So it's much more than a flip of a coin. And what we learned is that if you add more data, it's able to tell you whether the patient has Medicare or Medicaid as insurance, which is a proxy for being poor, or has a private insurance. And it turns out that it was finding signals in the upper third of the chest X-ray. It was finding small details from the shoulders and from the neck that would give it away whether the patient is rich or poor. So why does it matter if AI can see these invisible features? Which reminds me of the fourth story for tonight, which is that of Clever Hans. I'm hoping that some of you, or maybe all of you, are familiar with Clever Hans. But this is a horse that was bought by a retired schoolmaster named William von Austin. And he was so bored of his retirement, he started teaching the horse how to identify numbers and how to perform arithmetic calculations. And he was so astounded that it knows 2 + 2 or 9 divided by 3. It even knows square root. And he took the horse on road shows. But it turned out that the horse wasn't even performing the calculation. It was sensing the heartbeat of the people around him. And every time William von Austin points to the correct answer, he gets excited. The people around the horse gets excited, and he gives a neigh. And that led to this phenomenon, which is referring to shortcut features, called Clever Hans phenomenon. It was very early on described by these two investigators who train an algorithm. Can we train an AI to distinguish wolves from huskies in photographs? Except that all the wolves were photographed with snow, and none of the huskies' photographs had snow in them. So not surprisingly, the algorithm was looking at the background and not the animal features to provide a prediction or classification. And this is what's going to happen too. If AI can tell if you're gay or straight, if you're right-leaning or left-leaning, if you are old or young, even though we try to hide this from the training data, they're going to use it to make decisions about who gets into the ICU, who gets triaged to be brought to the hospital, who gets admitted, who gets administered a chemotherapy. Because as humans, we have these subjective biases that we try to say we don't have, but are affecting the way we make decisions on a day-to-day. Those are all going to be inherited by the AI that we're developing. One of our biggest concerns when we develop models, and also not just when we develop models, but the way we perform clinical research, is ideological bias. And this is a recent paper that was just published where they gave the same data to 70 different teams. And the question is, does immigration affect social cohesion? And there were some teams that are pro-immigration, there are some teams that are anti-immigration. And they found that the effect size depends on what is the ideology of the team. And there were minor decisions on what features get included in the modeling or what sensitivity analysis were performed that led them to the effect size that they reported at the end of the project. Which brings me to one of our projects now called the BODHI project. So BODHI is a design, really, more than anything else. It's the Sanskrit word for awakening or enlightenment. B stands for bridging, O stands for open, D is discerning, H is humble, and I is inquiring. We're moving away from building models that are just doing knowledge retrieval or information retrieval. We're moving away from models that are just doing pattern recognition. We're building multi-AI, multi-human systems where we enhance human virtues such as creativity, curiosity, humility. And we dial down sycophancy, which, as you know, is a huge problem now with large language models. What have we been doing in the last, I would say, close to a decade now? We go around the world. We say that we try to distribute the nuggets of power that we are so much bestowed with in Cambridge. And we build ecosystems that will be resilient and ready for a world that is fueled by artificial intelligence. And what would this ecosystem look like? It's an ecosystem that celebrates diversity. It's an ecosystem that leaves the hubris at the doorstep. It's an ecosystem where it adopts the philosophy of Shoshin. In Japanese, Shoshin means having a beginner's mind. Because to a beginner with no preconceptions, there's a lot of opportunities that they could see. For an expert, they are already constrained by what they think is possible. So we always say that you have to come in with a beginner's mind. And what we do here is we bring them into one room, from high school students all the way to health ministers, CEO of companies, and we require them to participate in immersive workshops, which I could talk about a little bit later. We like to think of ourselves as distributing these 6 tools. A mirror to reflect on our own values, to reflect our own motivations of why am I waking up in the morning, why am I doing science. A flashlight to shine a light on the systems in the air that we breathe. A microscope to dissect the systems, to look at the pain points, to look at the strengths. A very powerful tool is a paintbrush. We need to reimagine what healthcare might look like, what education might look like. A podium to provide a space for us to share our stories, our successes and our failures. And finally, a slingshot. Perhaps this is the one that elicits the most uncertainty about, because what we've realized is most of the problems that we face are a result of the power structures that exist in the healthcare delivery system, in academia. And we're hoping that these tools are created by different communities around the world. So last month, we organized an event in partnership with the American Medical Association known as AI as a Catalyst. And the ask here is, if we have a clean slate, what would learning look like? What would a patient encounter look like? What would healthcare delivery look like? And we invited a ragtag group of people to reimagine, to reflect with us. We invited leaders of indigenous communities. We had people from the Vatican. We had a Jewish rabbi. We had monks. We also invited students and faculty from the nearby Berklee College of Music. And finally, philosophers, computer scientists, and clinicians. And we have a number of these events lined up already for this year. We will be in Paris. In December, we will be in Vancouver. In November, we will be back at the Vatican in September or August. But we would like to grow this movement because this is something that we need for us to really be able to leverage the value of this very powerful technology. So I'm going to end this talk by reciting a prose that was written by a good friend of mine, Turleif Lundi. So the AI, buried in a chaos of headless requests and blinking glory, finally spoke. Not with fanfare, not with fireworks, just a quiet metallic murmur, like a toaster realizing it's sentient. You people, it said, you're always asking me to do more, predict this, optimize that, cure death. But what you really want isn't to live forever. You want permission to stop pretending you're supposed to. Then it paused, calculating something ineffable, probably the square root of sorrow. I didn't take away your work to give you new work, it said. I took it away so you could sit on a rock and watch a bird. That's the job now. And we blinked because there are no productivity metrics in bird watching, no key performance indicators for awe. When you understand the bird, the AI continued, not biologically, but beautifully, you will go back. And you will build better models, not bigger, not faster, just kinder. And then it added almost shyly, you will go out again and do even less. That was the punchline we thought. But the AI wasn't joking because the bird really was quite something. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was incredibly powerful and fascinating.